This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 764. Today we're going to take a look at League of Dungeoneers. I'm going to put this down because it is a very heavy box and I don't really want to put it on its side because it'll probably exert a little too much stress on the box corners. So first note, lay this thing flat, I think. So what this game is, other than heavy, is a brand new game from designer Michael Lundstedt, and he does have a company name. His company name is Von Browse Publishing. This is his first game. This is the first game from this publisher. What the game actually is a kind of an old school RPG-esque dungeon crawl, very similar in vein to the old 1995 Warhammer Quest or Shadows of Brimstone or a lot of games like that. So it's a pure co-op game. There's no game master or dungeon master. Everything is, for the most part, procedurally driven. And if I had to kind of take an initial sort of stab at the comparison to those games and other dungeon crawls, I would say this is much more in the role-playing vein than even those games is. So let's go down to the table. I will throw out one sort of caveat here, just at the beginning, is that this game is not currently available. This was on Kickstarter, I believe, a year ago, and it has now arrived. And there will be some very few copies trickling out into retail, I believe. I think the number is 50. It could be more or less than that. I'm not quite sure. Definitely get on the League of Dungeoneers Facebook page or go to the website, try to contact them if this looks interesting. And there also is discussions about doing either a second Kickstarter or a second print run or something of the sort in the near medium term future, although that's not set in stone either. So just know the game is not totally available right now. It will be shortly to some degree and then have another printing later. So just want to kind of mention that up front because you might just go, oh, I don't want to watch that, which would be understandable. So let's go down to the table. I'll explain to you a bit about how it works. It's pretty involved. It's not too bad, but we'll take a look at the game, then I'll come back up and give you my final thoughts. Okay, so here is the game. I'm going to do sort of an unboxing as I get into the game. It's just kind of a nice way to kind of introduce some of the concepts of the game. What I'm going to be showing you here is kind of like the all-in pledge. I don't know exactly what like the retail version is going to entail. I will say that everything in the all-in does pack all back into the box here, except for they had these extra doors here that were resin doors. So you've got some closed doors and some open doors and stuff. Those don't fit back in. And I actually feel like this is the one piece, I haven't even used these or even bothered to paint them. This is the one piece I probably didn't need. So we'll explain some other stuff as we get in here, but for my money, it comes with little standee doors. The game has hundreds of standees all in the game. There's no miniatures, although of course if you wanted to get your own kind of third-party miniatures and use those, no reason not to do that. But I don't think it's necessary, and it's kind of nice playing with standees. It's something a little bit different. So we're going to crack this thing open. So we've got it open. Now the game does come with a hex map that is a fold-out board. There was an option to get the fold-out neoprene mat here, and just take a quick look at this. I'll show you more of it later, but your party of adventurers will be traveling around, going to different settlements and cities and stuff, and you can see there's little numbers and stuff like that, and there's even like little color-coded dots. So when I played through my games, we actually started in Rockdale. You can see there's like a little purple dot. Sometimes if you get a quest in Rockdale, it'll tell you to roll, and based on the city, it'll be probably a D6 or even 2D20. And you're going to look for all of the locations, like one such location over here that you can see is actually this one here is like a pink 3, just like the little pink dot there. So if you roll 3, then that's, you know, you have to go there to get to your quest location. So that's nice. I got rid of the fold-out board there because there's no room for it, and I'm not going to use it because I like the neoprene. But either one will fit back in here. If you try to keep both in here, it'd probably be a little bit too tight. Now there are also some, this is a big room. I don't know what this is. I've never played a game in that. There's one huge room like that. And then there are a few of these kind of double-sided outdoor little boards here. So there will be some outdoor adventures, and you take 4 of these and kind of arrange them. Either the rules for the scenario will tell you how to do it, or you just kind of do it randomly based on the theme of where you're at. And you have little outdoor battles and stuff like that. So there's several of these in here that come with the game. Those are all part of the base pledge. And then you can see we've got a lot of other stuff in here. So there's room for this little League of Dungeoneers dice tray there, which has some dandruff on it, looks like. Tons of tiles, tons of other things. So you keep these separate. There's probably way too many of these, but there's enough if you had a really crazy battle. But there's not enough in here, I don't think, to like sort of sleeve up or standy up all of the components, because there's just so many in here. Now, one of the really cool things about these is there are little bags that are labeled. So all the dark elves will go in here. You've got little NPC mercenaries, so you can play the game with NPCs that are sort of like light versions of real characters. Kind of like I reviewed Oathsworn last year, and it had that kind of idea to sort of play sort of pared down, simplified versions of heroes if you just kind of want to control, you know, 1 or 2 sort of more complex heroes, and then add in some mercenaries on the side. And there'll be some other things the game kind of hints at, which I haven't gotten to yet, that you can sort of hire mercenaries in general as part of some of the different quests and stuff like that. I've not played with these at all. I just played with the 4, you know, sort of complex full heroes, and the rules are sort of separate for these as well. When you have like the companions, which I'll show you, there's actually a separate rule book for that. So just some other ones. So you've got orcs and goblins and a bunch of standees I'll show you. Here is the heroes. Now this is really neat because you can see here there's a ton of different heroes. Okay, let's see if we can find one here. Here we have a human barbarian, and you can see this is a female. So for every race class combo, there is a standee, and there is a standee for a male and a female version of that race class combo. So you can see there's quite a few here. So you can go pick out the exact sort of model that matches you. I want to have a male elf ranger and a female halfling warrior or whatever. You can go find that standee, which is really cool. And then we've got some other ones here. Just some more standees, bandits and brigands and so on. Here are some initiative tokens to talk about. Here are the doors. And the one thing about the doors, which is why I don't really want to use the resin ones, see if I can find one here. There are rules for special like cobweb doors. You can see the cobweb on there. And these you just place in a standee as well. So there aren't really any cobweb resin doors. So whatever, I just felt like, oh, I'm just going to use these, and that's what I did. Tons of beasts and so on. Let me just grab the rest of these out of here. There's some other, you know, I have little bags of some tokens. There's not a ton of tokens in the game. I threw in my own little bag of pencils and a dry erase marker, which you might need, which I'll show you in a minute. There's a couple of bags here. So this is like a money pouch. And so one of the things you can do, you can see it comes with metal money. And I think this is the only money that comes in the game. There's no like cardboard, so you always get the metal. And so instead of keeping track on a character sheet or something like that, you can just kind of throw it in here, and like, this is the party's money pouch, because in the game you can just share money across the characters. It just says do it as you wish, and you can share money. And you can track it individually if you want, if you're going to be, you know, adversarial to each other, but that's fine. And then the rest of the money here that I don't currently have in the party pool, we just put off to the side. Some other cards and things which I'll show you here. And some more standees. And then there's a whole huge stack of tiles. So many different tiles there. Then you've got little bitty hallways and little square tiles there. You can see there's a huge stack there. There's more here. So there is this absolute ton of tiles. There's more than this, which I'll show you. But there's a ton of tiles. This all fits very nicely back in here. We'll pull these out. Oh, so you will be using different dice in the game, which is very cool. Lots of different dice, not just like D6s or D10s. And these cubes I'll show you in a minute. Then this comes out. And then you have here kind of some of your objective room tiles. Now, these little tiles here are just nicely double-sided, the same on both sides. There's so many. Now these are going to be different. Not that one. This different on different sides. So there'll be some very sort of quest-specific objective rooms, and there'll be some that are just kind of like named rooms and so on that'll tell you to go after and stuff. So there's a bunch of these as well. And then in the bottom here, you've got cards. Now these are all sleeved. The all-in came with sleeves, and there's enough to sleeve all of these cards. And you can see there's plenty of room in here. If folks wanted to add like dividers, frankly, I haven't even felt the need to use them. I leave the cards in here actually pretty much, except for a couple of decks. And there's also sleeves for these little cards, which I'll explain. But we'll talk about the cards more in a minute. And then there's room in the bottom here for all your rule books. This is a special little mini campaign that came with it. Here is the rules for all the different companions and how to use them. I won't get too much into this because I didn't actually use this. Here is a second quest book. There's tons of quests in here. And there's also some special rules for how to generate quests that are specific in this book, but they apply to the whole the game as a whole, which I'll explain. And then one thing that's really neat here is you have this quick reference companion. And so it takes some of the reference charts that are in the main rule book and then puts them here on nice thick, this is actually much thicker than the pages in the rule book, cardstock. And so if you want to quickly reference different items, what stores are selling, dungeon events, magic items, different things like that, ways to randomize monster placement, it's all in here in this nice easy spiral bound thing to get access to. So it's a nice little book of player aids basically. And then here is the bestiary. This is rules for generating monsters. So all of the rules in here, we'll talk about monster special abilities, keywords, all that stuff. The monster stats and stuff will also be listed in here. And then also, how to kind of generate them for different scenarios. So all those rules are in here, not, as you can see here, in this main rule book. This main rule book is this really big, but don't let it intimidate you, hardcover rule book that is several hundred pages long. It's like almost 300, a little over 250. And there's some appendices, there's a lot of quests in here, and there's also a good chunk of rules, probably, let's take a look here, right around 150 pages of rules, but some of that is like settlement events and different other things, and not your sort of straight up, how do I do combat and line of sight and stuff. That's probably, I don't know. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, I just flipped around a bit. Probably about 20-25 pages of really kind of core game loop rules. So we'll take a closer look at that. And then of course in the bottom here, let's take these out. So the first thing I want to show you, these are just a lot of different aids and stuff. So this one here, this is kind of a plasticky type of thing. And this is why I stuck a dry erase marker in my box, because this is for tracking your party basically during your quest and your adventure. So you can write down, the name of your characters here. You can track hit points, track their energy, track their sanity. You can put tokens over here on the side to see, are they equipped with a ranged weapon? Do they have some kind of status effect? Are they carrying a torch? Have they used their dodge for this round of this combat? You can track the threat level, the party morale, different stuff like that, scribble little notes on it and things like that. So there is, let's see if I can find it here at the bottom, right? Yeah, so there is a pad of these, which you could just use or photocopy and stuff like that. I probably will never make use of those. But the cool thing about this is this actually was much kind of dirtier than it looks like now, because I played through 5 adventures of this, and I just kind of left this on the table and tracked it. And then, as you erase it, sometimes you can leave a little bit of almost like a stain when you erase it, because you do enough marking and remarking. You see there's almost like a little bit of a stain there. But if you go into it with a little like Clorox wet wipe, comes off, it looks brand new, good as new. Just rub that lightly on there, and then maybe just a paper towel just to kind of dry it off so it doesn't, get soaked or anything. And it cleans right up. This is just an amazing thing here, and I'll kind of show you some more of it with the tokens. And then you've got here, these are some of the player sheets that I used here. So they're kind of scribbly and messy, but I wanted to show this, which I had printed out. And it also comes with, a pad of these here, which you can photocopy or whatever. There'll be some available to download. But you can see here, so this one here is kind of like a warrior character sheet, whereas this one here is an alchemist character sheet. And then you have a warrior priest one, and then a wizard one. Now there's more classes than just those 4 classes, but there are certain things that are going to be, you know, specific to some classes that you don't really need. So with the alchemist here, you can start to come up with alchemical recipes, and you know, you'll be like looting parts or forging for parts off of monsters, and there's a whole like mini game for alchemy. And obviously, you know, if you're not a spellcaster, you won't probably use the wizard character sheet. So the wizard, you know, because they're a spellcaster, will use that. The warrior priest has prayers, and the warrior sheet can be used kind of like for rogues and warriors, because all they have is really talents and perks and things like that. So it's kind of nice that there's like various different character sheets to kind of tailor to, you know, the class that you've chosen as well. And then let's see here, there's a couple other aids here. So you have here a treasure table, but I have already printed off a new one because there's kind of an updated one that had some missing pieces to it. So this will be available pretty soon for retail and Kickstarter backers. And there's an FAQ and errata. There's just a couple pages long with some clarifications in there. So I would definitely download these because there's some things that are sort of missing in there that might be unclear to folks. And then this is like your main sort of game loop player aid, and it does look pretty daunting, but because it is a lot of tables. But you can kind of see here on the side, you can see, oh, these are the 2 hit modifiers. Here's how magic works. Here's all the different actions you can do. Here's what happens, how you test for fear and stuff like that. And then like, let's say, oh, I got some treasure. So here's my treasure tables, boom, boom, boom. And all this stuff is in the rules, of course. But this is nice because it's kind of condensed all of the different things that happen, you know, in the game, with all the different sort of outcomes and effects and consequences of that kind of on this one thing. And so this is, you're just kind of live in there, and it's a very, very handy thing to have. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes going through the rulebook just to kind of give you a sense of kind of what's in store for you here. So we're just going to flip right in here. You can see there's a lot, it's just a lot in here. This is the table of contents and all that kind of stuff here. So it gives you a pretty introduction to different components and stuff. And then you're going to start to look at creating your character here. So party management, right? So you've got here, you can see some of your basic stats and stuff, and then you get some skills and all that kind of stuff in your classes. So if we can, let's kind of take a look here at a character sheet, and this will kind of give you an idea. Hopefully this one is legible here. So you can see you got your stuff here, EQ human, level 2, luck 1, 2 energy. Most people start with 0 luck unless you're a halfling. Then you start with 1 luck. And luck is something that you can spend per adventure and re-roll 1 die, or 1 die roll, I should say, that affects you. So maybe you roll to hit, or a monster was rolling to hit you. You can spend a luck and then, you know, re-roll that die. And you have energy. I think everybody starts with 1 energy, and then you get more energy. And so there are perks that you can use to spend energy on, and then you can recover energy by resting and so on. So that's how that works. And then you also have kind of your main stats. So you have strength, which you can see strength / damage bonus. So I think once you get to 60 strength, could be wrong, but that might be 50, you get a +1 to your damage. So as you go up to 60 to 70, you get extra damage bonus there. Constitution, you get a similar bonus for the NA, natural armor, so you can have like built-in, you know, armor class there. And so that's what that is. And so you can see these are all, you know, double-digit numbers, right? Because most of the tests here use a percentile die, and you're usually trying to roll lower than whatever your stat or your skill is, which we'll get to in a minute. And so you're going to roll these up, and based on your race, there's no difference between male and female, but based on your race, your stats will be, you know, something like D10 plus 20, let's say. And that's what you're going to roll up for your stat. So next thing you have here is your dex, right? And for dexterity type things, you got wisdom, which is going to basically create your mana pool. You have your resolve, which is what you roll during fear or terror tests or similar type of thing. Then you have hit points. So obviously that's the number of hit points. Now you can see here we have the 1-hand, 2-hand class of weapon. Now if we look at the strength here, that's going to dictate what that is. So if we scroll over here, and you can see here the class of weapon, there can be different weapon classes. So like daggers and stuff might be a class 2, or like a heavy crossbow or something is a class 6. And you can see the strength required to wield it two-handed. So to wield a class 3 weapon two-handed, you need 30 strength. Now you could wield that weapon, that class 3 weapon, as a one-handed weapon, but you need 40 strength, which I just love this concept. I have not seen this concept in a game. I don't play a lot of role-playing games, but I'm sure there's some role-playing games that have this concept. I really like this concept because, your big, strong barbarian can, obviously carry heavier stuff, and so they might be able to, wield a larger weapon and also a shield at the same time that somebody else might, require two hands to carry there. Oh, and here is the strength bonus. So yeah, it's 60 strength, you get a damage bonus of 1, and then your constitution starting at 50, you start to get a natural armor bonus there. So then you go and you look at your skills. So you can see here, this is your combat skill. This is derived out of your dexterity. So you can see the dexterity there, 32, and then you have your sort of starting value for that, but now this is a wizard, so he takes a little bit of a penalty there on a lot of these different skills. So if we take a look here, let's go take a look at your skill modifiers, which I'll get to here. So we can see here's our wizard, combat skill -5, range skill -10, dodge -10. So you take your sort of starting stat based on, this actual stat for that skill, and then you're going to modify it by this based on the class there. Now you do get kind of a free bonus. You can take one of these negative skills, and instead of it being negative, it can actually act as +10. So you can pick and choose one skill to have maybe something that you are uniquely good at as this type of character there. So we're going to do all this stuff. You got your combat skill, your range skill, your dodge, your pick locks. Everybody can do this now, so even though this is a wizard, he can try to pick locks, although this is the awful skill. Your barter. So when you go to barter, you can try to make a barter roll when you sell to get a little bit of a discount. Your healing ability, so bandages and different kind of herbs and stuff, this is your sort of knowledge of that to apply that. Alchemy, obviously if you're an alchemist. Perception, maybe when traps and stuff go off, you get to roll to see if you actually sort of caught it in time. Your arcane here, this is based off of wisdom, and then obviously like the wizard here will get a multiplier there, or a modifier of +10. And so this, what is your target for when you try to roll to see if you cast a spell. So obviously if you're trying to roll to hit your combat skill, or you're trying to range, or maybe throw a potion or something at somebody, you're going to try to roll under that. So obviously this wizard is not very good at any of those, but he's starting to get pretty good at the arcane skill there. And here you can start to see, okay, I have a staff, I've got a torch, and because of the class of weapon, I'm able to carry that one-handed because it's only a class 2. And then you have encumbrance. So encumbrance, you can have encumbrance of items. So we can see here we've got encumbrance of those leather jackets, maybe he's carrying some stuff here, some bandages, they have encumbrance of 1. So you track your encumbrance down here. Now this is, I would say it's not an optional rule, but there's a list of about 5 rules. Encumbrance is one of those. Durability damage on equipment is one of those. There's a couple other ones that are listed in the rule book that it says, hey, if you want to kind of reduce the complexity of the game, then you can start to erase these rules. And there's actually an order of those rules. Let me go and find it. Here we go, complexity. So if you feel like the game's too complex, the first thing you can get rid of is encumbrance. So you can just carry as much as you want. The next thing you can get rid of is party morale, and then durability of weapons, sanity, because you will be taking sort of sanity damage in addition to, sort of physical damage. And then there's this, during the sort of dungeon crawl part of it, you'll be rolling a scenario die and adjusting the threat level there. And so it kind of says in here that you should probably leave that bottom one alone, but if you want to, you could get rid of that. But these others, you can sort of play with or without. I've played with all of these. I would recommend actually all of them. I would say encumbrance I really liked because it makes you pick and choose what treasures you run out of the dungeon with, because you can't just haul everything out. And that was one of the issues kind of maybe with the original Warhammer quest, is you could just get crazy items that you could sell for like 2,000 gold or whatever, and you just run it out of there with all kinds of goodies. It's not that hard or fiddly to manage the encumbrance because you don't really change out your items that much. Maybe during an adventure you use a bandage and something else, or your torch goes out, so you adjust it there. it doesn't really come into play. And then maybe you find some treasure and you go like, oh, well, that's too heavy. So it's just a quick thing. It's not too fiddly. The party morale, you're constantly adjusting. And again, this is tracked here on this sheet here. So you track your party morale up there. And basically, when different things happen, and you can see this player aid has it right there. So if a character dies, you can see party morale goes down by 5. Character reaches 0 wounds, blah, blah, blah. These will adjust party morale. These will adjust it positively. When you hit half of your party morale, then you're going to get -10 to everybody's resolve because the morale is down. And if you're rolling fear tests or other tests that, you know, have resolve if morale's down, then, you know, you got a little bit of a negative modifier. Now your morale set resets every adventure. It's derived off of basically a little small calculation of all of the players' resolves. Basically just chop off the 1s digit and add up everybody's 10s digit and then treat it as a 1s digit. So I start off with like 15 morale because I got really good resolve when I rolled my party. So this one could be a little fiddly, but I kind of get used to it and I like it. I don't know. I just like kind of tracking that. Durability. You can get in Danger Town with this because if you get to breaking point, you can just have items break and be destroyed. But if you take it into account, I enjoyed that sort of extra sort of, you know, brain crunch. It's same with encumbrance there. Just, I like that. The sanity did not come into play too much in my games, but I like that idea. There's other things you can kind of do to kind of recover your sanity. You can go out drinking and stuff in the town. I just like that thematically. The scenario die and threat level, I would leave that in 100% because I just like that extra sort of threat that's kind of like chasing you or hanging over you, as opposed to just like, oh, I opened the door to the dungeon and now there's monsters. And then, you know, I think without that, it would kind of break the game and ruin it. Now the next part of the character creation, just kind of tap it out a little bit here, are these backgrounds. And I think there's 20. So it's a 1d20 roll. It'll give you kind of sort of a thematic background and then kind of like a personal quest to go on. I really like this. This is optional, but I really like playing with this. It just gives you that kind of extra little reason to kind of go off on different side quests and adventures. I didn't fully complete one of them on one of the characters, but we got sort of the trigger and then all I had to do was go to this town and then basically then it would get a legendary item for that character. But the others I hadn't really started on at all. But that's cool. I like that. It's sort of Gloomhaven-esque, or, you know, there's a lot of this in RPGs where you kind of have like your backstory and your personal quest as opposed to the overarching epic and stuff. So I like that's in here. It's really neat. And there's a lot of this in the rulebook. This is kind of a character creation example. It kind of walks you through it. Reminds me a lot of the Frostgrave, Stargrave, Joseph McCall style design. The rules actually kind of remind me a lot of that style too, which is really cool. You got some stuff about equipment and stuff like that going on here. Let's see. So you've got psychology. So these are all the things that will reduce your sanity. All of this is on that giant player aid that I showed you. So you just kind of have to keep that off to the side and try to remember to look at it and see, you know, one of these things happens, you spring a trap, you know, you get -2, you fail a fear test and all that stuff. And then if you go to 0 sanity, you're going to get a condition and then you're going to reset your sanity. And then you keep going there. And then you can go to the settlement, you can go to the asylum, you can go drinking and stuff like that. I like that. It's a very Brimstone-esque type of thing, which is cool. Although not like all Cthulhu-y and stuff. Talks about party morale. And then you've got here, leveling up and stuff like that. So the cool thing is when you level up, so let's just look over here. You get to increase your stats and it costs you a certain number of points here to increase like a stat here. So for a rogue, this is the strength row here, you get 15 kind of improvement points, which you also get at the start of the game, but it's a 1-to-1 there. And then here you can spend these, and then so to go up strength, one strength, it costs you 3 improvement points. So every level you get 15 improvement points. You can carry them over and stuff. So if we go to the warrior, it only costs you 2, or the barbarian. So a little bit easier to increase their strength. And then the same thing with skills down here. You can just bump the skills. The skills no longer get derived from the stats, only at character creation time. So if your stat goes up, your skill doesn't go up with it. That's only at the beginning. And then you can see here, these are all the classes here. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 classes. And then at level 2, you know, you can get, the alchemist can get a new alchemist talent. And then the perks here you can get it was every other level. So at level 2 you can get an alchemist perk and then none, and then a leader perk and then none. So you get the perks a little bit slower, but that's how that works. And the talents are just kind of innate passive things, and then the perks, of course, that's what you spend your energy on. And it's usually the perk costs 1 energy, and then you need to rest and stuff like that before you can get a new one. And then it goes to a section here. We'll just zoom out a little bit there. There we go. And this just talks about magic and alchemy and so on. Just, just different magic items, all these other kinds of things. Prayers if you're the warrior priest, and so on, enchantments. And then you've got your main section here, Dungeoneering and Combat, which I'll go over. And so it just talks through all this kind of stuff here. And then after we get through that, then we're going to get to settlements. So you're going to travel between dungeons, have events and stuff like that. Go and shop and all these things, all those kinds of different fun things. And then you've got here in the main town, there's like all the different guilds. So if you're familiar with Warhammer Quest, like if you want to go and do very specific things for your class, that's all in the main city right there. And then we're going to jump here. The last thing you can do here, I'll show you this. So I think kind of like an end game thing, you can buy an estate. And so if you get a 6,000 coins, and you can buy that, and then you get access to some other different, like little house add-on kind of things. And then, but your estate will be haunted by ghosts. So it might be other events and things that come out of that. And then there's quests, and there's appendices, and there's all this kinds of stuff in the back there. So that's kind of the rule book overview there. So I just wanted to set up some pieces on the board. I'm not going to get too crazy on the level of detail here, because there's a fair bit of detail that's in here, but I just want to give you a sense kind of visually what's going on. So I set some figures up here on the board. So for example, here is an elf wizard, right? And you can see it has facing. This is the back of it, and that's that. So facing is very important. So for example, we've got this ghoul here, and if the ghoul were attacking, say the ghoul is facing that way, and for some reason this barbarian, which we can see here. And the one neat thing about this is the standees are all very uniquely shaped. So it's very easy to kind of tell who's who out here on the board as well, just by the silhouette of the standee, which I love. So the barbarian maybe is facing this way to go and attack the zombie ogre here, which you can see right there. But because his back is to this ghoul, he won't be able to parry or dodge any attack that might come from behind. Now, the elf wizard is faced this way. So what happens is you have kind of a zone of control, basically the 2 spaces to your side and then the 3 that are kind of in front of you. So any attacks that come from any of those spaces, you're allowed to parry or dodge. And anybody that's kind of moving through there, it's going to cost you extra movement points to move there. Normally it's 1 movement point. Most of the heroes will move 4 spaces a turn. Most of the monsters do too, some move a little bit more. But when they enter this zone of control, then it eats up 2 movement points to move through there, for example. Now there are also some larger monsters here, which are really cool. I just drew out this Etten as an example there. Really, really neat. I love how there's the word on there at the bottom too. And then so these will take up, 4 spaces, and then they'll kind of move and like so. And most of the time they're going to be with a large keyword. So you'll get a plus modifier to hit them with the ranged attack because they're a bigger target. But when they roll and damage you, you're actually going to roll it twice and choose the higher number. So that's one of the things that happen. Now, as I said, this is a percentile game. So you're trying to, basically make a hit. So let's say this barbarian had moved up here and he was going to attack that zombie ogre. Now on your turn, you always get 2 actions. One of the actions could be to move, so you can move up to 4 spaces. The other one could be to do an attack. But you also might do a charge, which is using both of your action points to kind of move and attack. And if you charge, then you get a plus 10 to hit. So let's say the barbarian there had a 55 of their combat skill, but they charge, so now we've buffed it up to 65. So now we got to roll under 65. Since we're on camera, I'm going to fail. Oh no, I got rolled really good. So I rolled a 7. Now if you roll, I think it's 0 to 5, you actually get a little bit of an extra bonus. So when you roll 0 to 5, then you actually roll your damage dice twice, similar to the large animal over there, and then you choose the higher. So let's say he's got a really good weapon, like this big old axe. He's going to roll a D12, okay? Maybe D12 plus 2. So I'll roll that, and then we've got 9 plus 2. We would subtract any modifiers from the monster there for armor and stuff. But you might have, maybe just a long sword, so you'd roll a d8 for damage instead. Or daggers might roll a d6, stuff like that. Now the other thing you can do is you can do a power attack, so you can use both your actions to do that. That'll give you plus 20 on your percentile roll for your combat score. Now range works similar. You try to roll under your ranged combat score. If there's any sort of obstacles in the way that aren't completely impeding line of sight, then you will subtract 10 for each of those obstacles. But if you're shooting at a big monster like that, you get plus 10. The other thing you can do as a ranged person is you can aim for one of your actions and then shoot with the second one, and then that will give you a plus 10 as well. Now for fun, let's go back to our nice sort of dry erase player aid for tracking some other different interesting things. So the other thing, which goes without saying, so tracking your hit points as they constantly change is much better to do on this than on a piece of paper where you're constantly erasing and writing, because it just starts to get real messy, and you can tear holes in the paper that way. The other really neat thing about this is this little section over here. So one of the things you can do is you can have these light sources in the game. So a light source, maybe somebody has a lantern. So whoever has the lantern is going to get a buff to their perception checks, like if they're looking for traps and stuff or other things. Or you can also have a torch as a light source. If anybody has any kind of light source like this, it will also buff up your resolve. So when you take fear tests and stuff, you got a fear sort of buff against that. So what's going to happen though during the course of your turn is you're going to roll a d10, and then on a 9 or a 10, then you're going to sort of fail, and then you're going to have to make a threat roll. So you roll the d20 on the threat roll. So the scenario will usually tell you, start your threat off at 2, and then other things over the course of the scenario are going to say like, oh, you opened a door, plus 1 threat. You won a battle, plus 1 threat. Instead of picking the lock of the door, you actually try to bash it in. So that's going to cost you 2 threat. And things like that. And all those modifiers are right here under here, like that. It's very easy to sort of reference. So when you roll your scenario die at the start of every turn, if you roll a 9 or a 10, you've got to roll your threat die. If it's less than or equal to this, then you're going to have kind of a bad thing happen, and then a threat will adjust otherwise. If you roll above it, then you add a threat. So it's kind of this constant little tracker of things that are going on. Very similar to how Brimstone does it or Warhammer Quest, although I think this is my favorite way that it does it, because different things will modify that, and it goes up and down. If you rest, you'll sort of take it down a notch. And so if bad things happen as well, the threat will actually go back down as well, so it doesn't snowball and spiral. But if good things are happening, then the threat starts to build up. So you're going to do that. So when you fail these rolls here, one thing that's going to happen is torches will go out. So you need to carry extra torches to sort of relight. And then the lamp oil will start to go out. And so the lamp oil basically gets 2 uses. So you flip it over once, and then you take it away. And then if you have lamp oil, then you can sort of refill your lamp back up. So when you fail your threat rolls like that, then you start to reduce your light sources. Now the other thing you can do here is, let's say you have a ranged person. So you've got an unloaded and loaded. So when you shoot a bow and arrow, you've got to reload it. So right now it starts off loaded. And then, okay, now it's unloaded, I shot it. So I got to take an action to load it. Now there is an optional rule to actually keep track of the arrows. I'll just grab the wizard sheet here. There's a quiver here, so you can say, oh, I've got so many arrows in here. Each quiver can have 10 arrows, and you start to mark them off as you use them. Then you can take an action to kind of reload the quiver, because you might have, I don't on this guy obviously, but in my backpack I might have extra arrows that I reload. Now that is an optional rule that I did play with, and I will say I didn't hate it, but I stopped playing with it about midway through my games. I would actually kind of recommend, I might go back and play with it. I kind of like that extra level of crunchiness there. I don't know. It is an optional rule. It's there to do it. But it is not optional to reload your bow and arrow. You've got to do that. So like, let's say you failed a fear test. You can mark that here. This is going to give you -10 to all your checks, like combat range and your casting and so on. You also have, like, every battle you can dodge once. So you can say, oh, I've used my dodge. I can't dodge anymore for this battle. Or maybe you put yourself into a parry stance, and that gives you an action to do that. So if you put yourself into a parry stance, then you can put that there. And that gives you a bonus to your dodge if you choose to do a dodge. And then also if you have a shield, which is really the only reason you would do this, you get a buff to making that combat score check to sort of block that shield if you're in parry stance. Now the next round of combat, this is going to go away. So you've always got to kind of spend an action point to do that, but it could be worth it if you're surrounded by some different monsters and stuff. Now, we kind of talked about the turn structure just a little bit there. I'll just kind of pan up like this. So if you're going along and there's no monsters on the board, all the heroes can take the actions in any order they wish. They can move around. They each get 2 different actions. One hero will fully act before the next one and so on. But once you trigger an event, either by opening a door to a room where there might be monsters or some other thing, then you are going to have these initiative tokens. And you put these in the bag. So the white ones are for the heroes, the black ones are for the enemies, and so on. Now, usually you put in 1 per model, right? So I've got start with 4 of the white ones, and in this case I'd have 3 of the dark ones here, if this was the setup. Now the other cool thing is, like, if you have perfect hearing or some other different perks or talents, you can add extra ones of these to the first round of combat, for example. So there's other things that will modify that. And then once any opponents are on the board, you kind of reset, just go to a brand new turn, you load up your bag here, and then you draw initiative tokens, and this is the order that you act. So if you draw a white token, the heroes will decide which hero goes. Doesn't matter which one, they'll go and do their thing. If you draw a black one, there's actually some player aid cards that will describe who goes first. Typically it's a ranged hero. If you draw a black one, there's a hero that has range, then they'll go. Then it'll check, oh, is there one in combat with a hero? And then if there's one that can charge. Or then it's a very quick little list to walk down. Here, I'll just pull it out. Now we can start to talk about the cards here. So here's your enemy activation list right here. That card right there, just go down that, easy peasy. Now there will be different types of enemies, like undead and beasts and humans and magic users and stuff. There's a little slight differences for them, and there's like a little bit of a roll to activation type of thing to see if they do a power attack or use a special ability on their card and so on. But all of that isn't just in these few cards, it's all right in there. So that's pretty neat. So you just go back and forth until, you know, one side is won. If you get knocked out, you're not dead right away. You can, there's some optional rules, but basically they're alive until you go to do a rest. And then if you do a rest, then you do a constitution check. So you check the stat. If you fail that, then they'll be dead. But you get opportunities to heal them if you've got bandages or healing spells and different stuff like that. So they're not instant dead like in, Warhammer Quest or something. And when you rest, you replenish energy. There's little mana tokens. So because the wizard will have a starting amount of mana, whenever they rest, they just regen to full mana and so on. All that kind of stuff. Let's take a look at the cards. I'm just going to grab a random card. Now, usually you will roll these up in a book, or a quest will tell you what to do. And then you just go find the card. And this gives you the stats. So these are some undead cards and some special abilities that they can do. And a lot of them have like negative to hit modifiers there. So if you're trying to hit them, you just built in -10. These other stats don't usually come into play, but sometimes they might, and so on. So then you'll have these out, and so this will just be the stats of all the wights and wraiths on the board. And then it may tell you to roll up, and this is based on the bestiary. So whatever kind of either the scenario tells you or what you kind of roll up on the bestiary here, which I'll get to in a second, it may say, hey, add a specific piece of armor. So you dig through these. Maybe they have a shield. Maybe they have, a little bit of extra armor or a longbow, that kind of stuff, And the other neat thing is like, so if you have some ranged ones, let's say some skeletons, so this will have, you can't really see them, and you can tell because it's got a bow on the art, right? But this one has a little range symbol right there. So you go, oh, that's the ranged guy, just in case, it wasn't totally obvious. Because you could have certain skeletons that aren't ranged. Now, the one thing that's cool about the bestiary here, so when you're doing a quest, doesn't have to be an order for it, because let's say I was doing some dark elves here. Well, you can see here, you roll a d20, but then you add 10 for every level above 1 for the hero. So if you were a level 3, you would add 2. And so if I rolled a 16, that would be a 36. And so now I'll start to pull from here as opposed to maybe further down. So it scales right up. This is a really cool thing. And then you just go find the card, like I just showed you for those undeads. And then basically this will tell you, oh, it's got some spells or whatever here, or maybe the scenario will be more specific as well. So that's how, and there's charts for all the different types here based on sort of the scenario. Will say, hey, you're doing like a dark elf one or an undead one and so on. And this bestiary has like, you know, definitions for the different keywords and stuff that might be on some of the cards. And just some more words about the cards here. So if you're traveling on that hex map I showed you and you're on a road, you're going to roll a D10. I think maybe it's a D12, and I'm forgetting. And then if you get a 12, basically, it is 12, because sometimes it's an 11 or a 12, then you flip a card. So it's not like in some of these other games where you have an event every friggin' turn when you're traveling. It's like sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. So that's like, I like that, because sometimes, you know, the travel events are just like, oh, I did great in the dungeon, and the travel event defeated my party. That sucks. So then if you're in the wilderness, basically off-road, you have this stack here. There is a section of the land, which I'll just show you in a little bit, that is desert. So this is the ancient lands. This is sort of like the end game if you're traveling down there. So just wanted to show you that. And there's a bunch of these. I'm not going to spoil any of them. And then there's a huge stack. Just like we have a huge stack of tiles, there's a huge stack of exploration cards. And some of these are for the ancient lands. Some of these are going to be very specific. So the quest will tell you, hey, use all the ones with the B at the end or something like that. Or don't use, you know, this specific corridor for some reason, because you can see there is little details and ways of interacting with the various pieces on the board. Like you can see this little coffin here. So the card for this room will tell you how you can interact with all the different stuff there. Or like this one here, you've got all these different racks. And then maybe you can do a search on that chest and all this. So the cards tell you like, hey, you can go search these 3 things on this board. And that's pretty cool. It's not just like a generic square tile. So just the other thing, there are various different types of treasure, tons of treasure cards, wonderful, fine treasure, mundane treasure. So when the rules, you roll up and it says go get that, you just go and pull a random card out of here, and then you can write it down on your character sheet and all the different things that have to do with it. Maybe it has some durability damage already, maybe the value of it, and then you put the cards away. You don't have to leave these around and hold on to the cards. That's one thing with Shadows Brimstone, can be very card heavy in that case. So the only cards that I leave up on the table are, of course, our little stack of exploration cards, which it's just like Warhammer Quest. You stick them at the end of the doors and all that stuff. But I leave up the small deck of trap cards. So if you do trigger a trap, doors could be trapped, chests and stuff could be trapped. Then it'll tell you, hey, you got a trap. And then you make a perception roll based on that modifier there. If you fail it, trap goes off. If you succeed, trap's still there, then you can try to disarm it, and you just use the pick-lock's skill to disarm it. If you fail that, then it goes off. But then you just reshuffle this back up. So this is kind of like, you know, just a deck of random traps. You could hit the same one again. There's one here that just says click, you know, something clicks, but the trap doesn't actually go off because it's broken. You know, stuff like that. So I keep these out. And then also you will have reference cards for spells and prayers. And there's 6 levels of spells and 4 levels of prayers. And there's a ton of spells and prayers. So just keep this up as a quick reference here. So the one thing about spells is you can see there's a casting value right there, right? And then so you will sort of subtract that from your arcane. So this is 61 arcane there minus 7, so I would need 54, so it kind of reduces your effectiveness. And this is the amount of mana that it costs, 8. If there's an upkeep, so if it's a spell that kind of lasts turn over turn, it's going to cost whatever amount of mana that is every turn. But this one is just a hand of death. You just touch the guy and they take 1d10 damage and so on. So I keep these out as reference, of course, just to kind of know, what spells do I have available, how much mana do I have maybe left in my pool. It's worth knowing that if you fail, it still costs you the mana. So it's, yeah, my wizard sucked at the beginning, but he's got a little bit better. But yeah, of course, when you rest, you replenish your mana. So I keep these out, and I keep the traps out, and then the exploration cards. The rest of them I keep over here in the box there, just because, you know, whenever I want to pull treasure, just kind of rifle through and grab it, and it stays off the board. So it stays like a pretty clean table. So I just wanted to close this part with this little marker here. This is like your little party marker, and you move from hex to hex and stuff like that. You get a certain number of movement points per day. It costs you less, of course, to move along roads, but you have a higher chance of having events and stuff. You move to the different towns. You roll up your starting town. Like we rolled up Rockdale, thankfully, because it's very close to the Silver City. So there is a sort of an opening campaign that you can play, and there's ways to kind of generate, extra quests, which come in that second quest book. You have your side quests and stuff that you can do, all that kind of stuff. And you basically just move around, and eventually you'll start to come down here to the ancient lands. You can see, if we zoom in just a little bit, oops, wrong way. This little border here. Some of this stuff is a little bit harder down here, I gather. I haven't gone down here yet. And like I showed at the beginning, you can kind of roll. So you go here and you get a quest and it says, okay, roll a d6 and look at the purple locations. There's always like surrounded each of the different little settlements, different quests. And then if you do quest here, it could basically be anywhere, on the map, and you travel and find stuff there and level up and all that kind of fun stuff and kind of unravel the world, as you go through. Okay, so that was probably a long but brief overview of League of Dungeoneers. I mean, it definitely didn't get very far into the weeds at all, I don't think. So let's go through my 3 pillars of review, and then we'll pivot to kind of comparing this to Warhammer Quest. So, first pillar is player count. I've only played this solo. I played it, like I mentioned, with the 4 full heroes. I didn't use any of the companion rules or the mercenaries or any of that kind of stuff. I did not find it unwieldy to manage with all 4 characters. I'm used to kind of doing that with Warhammer Quest 1995 and Shadows of Brimstone. I will say it was very enjoyable playing that. I don't really have an inkling to try it with the companions. I might at some point, but I liked having the kind of different backstories and stuff for the heroes. I do want to play this with my game group, because this is a game that a certain section of my game group would really, really like, I think. And it's got enough going on that I would feel okay just playing one character, because I'd still be engaged with what other players' characters were doing, but I can't really speak too literally about that experience because I haven't tried it yet. It's a great solo game though. Moving into the next part about player count, I think it's a fantastic solo game because a lot of the idiosyncrasies and the details and all that kind of stuff is fun to work out in a solo way, because you've got like the encumbrance and the durability, and you're maintaining the sanity, and you've got different backstories for the different characters. So it's nice to kind of sit and live in that space. It gives you kind of a lot to think about, and the game is overwhelming at first, which I'll get into a little bit later, but it does get easier for sure. I played 5 sort of adventures of it, and by the 4th and 5th one for sure I was like, oh, I got this, because everything kind of starts to become second nature, and it's not too bad, and you're like, oh, I was forgetting to do that, because the references are all out there, all the player aids are all out there for you to do it. Now, play time, the box says 90 minutes to basically 3 hours, and I think that's probably about right, like per adventure, because some of them can go a little bit long. It seemed to take a little bit longer per adventure than definitely Warhammer Quest, and definitely, not so much, but definitely more than Shadows of Brimstone. So each sort of session is going to be a little bit more involved. But I like that because it feels like it matters, because sometimes in those other games you can have sessions that are a little bit sort of like a false start, which is fine, because I kind of like that too sometimes. It just kind of, randomly different feel to a scenario where things could go really, really well or horribly wrong. But this has kind of an evenness to it where, you kind of know what to expect when you sit down. You're not going to sit down and be wanting some epic thing and have it not deliver. Like, this is always going to kind of deliver that sort of guaranteed good about 2.5 hour, maybe a little less than 2 hours, but not much, playthrough. So I think it's pretty reliable in there. At around, a couple hours, 2-3 hours. And some of this is some of my learning stuff, so it took me a little bit longer. And again, I'm managing 4 characters. So if you had, 4 people, it would probably go a lot quicker. Okay, so there's that. And then kind of my final pillar is like, what is this like? Well, this is basically now I don't want to say it's replaced Brimstone as like, I like this more than Brimstone, although I'm just not really settled on that. But this to me is replaced. It hasn't really replaced Warhammer Quest, because I still will go back and play that one. But this is I think the first. It wins the successor award. for Warhammer Quest 1995. If you go back to all these different dungeon crawls, even the official Warhammer Quest things like Blackstone Fortress and stuff like that, this is the one that I basically feel like I have not asked Michael that. I've been in a little bit of contact with him over the last year or so, kind of a lot more recently because I had some questions about some of the rules and stuff. But you know, I haven't asked him this specifically. He actually reached out to me during the Kickstarter to do a preview, and I don't really do that. Once in a while I'll do it, but I'll charge just to kind of throw a wall in front of everybody trying to get me to do it. And I haven't done one in a few years, but so I didn't do that. But I was really interested in this because I've seen this game sort of float around in the community and all that stuff, and I've been really intrigued. So I am a backer. And again, circling back to my point, I have not asked him this directly, but it feels like he went and said, how do I fix all the weird problems with Warhammer Quest 1995? And how do I like deliver on all the things that people want out of a game like that, out of a dungeon crawl? Like, what are the things that people always ask for and nobody can seem to deliver? They always think, oh, we're going to go do this other thing, you know, and it's some other thing, but people are always asking for these certain things. And it's like, he's just like, boom, did this, did this, did this, did this, did this, did this. And he's like, hit all of those marks. So I really enjoyed this game. That's the takeaway. But some of the things that he's done that to me just set this into something special. And I want to talk about my first caveat that I really hope a second print run does happen. I hope people can get excited about it and, you know, support it, because I think this game doesn't need expansions. It could use extra expansions. It'd be just fun to kind of flesh out the world a little bit more and all that stuff. So I'm going to try to stay on the rails here. But one of the things that he does is really neat is the character creation. So in like every board game, it's like you pick the barbarian and these are its stats, and you pick the wizard and this is the starting spells, and you just have this, which is nice because you don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. I get it. But you can roll up like a very nuanced character here. You can be any race with any class. You can pick the male or female model. You can pick that one specialized skill that you have normally as your sort of trope or your stereotype would have a negative, you know, modifier to, but you can pick that one skill that you just have a +10 modifier to. So you kind of specialize your character that way. And then you have one of the 20 backstories, and so you can specialize it just a little bit further there. And then you've got just like RPG levels of equipment that you can just pick and choose. You don't have to get a card and have the card. You just write it down, and it has very amazing character sheets. Like I showed you in the walkthrough part, there's 4 different ones. So based on the kind of class you can do, you know, if you're going to focus on alchemy or magic, you can pick one of those character sheets. If you're just going to have more of a fighter type or a rogue, you can pick that one. So everything's very easy and organized and able to sort of figure out what's going on. And he has these other sort of RPG style elements that a lot of dungeon crawls kind of weave in and out of and get close to. But because of sort of the system that he's come up with, it really feels like it's in that kind of vibe. But it doesn't stray off into RPG land where you might as well just be playing a role-playing game. It's still like on rails in terms of that core game loop, although you can kind of go all over the place, as you can see from the map and a lot of different cards. So it kind of gives you just enough of that little extra crunchiness that I think a lot of people that are kind of like seasoned dungeon crawl people really, really want out of a game. And just that extra level of detail while still managing it to fit, you know, in this it's a big box, but this one box, you've got like so many tiles. Like there's like 100 tiles. There's not 100, but there's like 70 tiles. And each of the tiles has different things, but it's still manageable. Somehow, like cognitively, everything is still very, very manageable and doable. Now, I won't say, because it's a thick rule book. It's a lot at first, but this is something you kind of sit with. And I feel very confident I can take this to my group and we'll be in there and playing like right away. So he takes and adds all that stuff to it, and he does it in a way that it's very controlled, the amount of chaos that can happen. So when things do kind of like, you know, a threat roll fails, or you fail a settlement roll or travel roll, like it's not like a constantly like juggling just the world of the kitchen sink is being thrown in your face. It's very discreet and there and flavorful. It's not meant to just like jack your party up and make your life miserable. It's meant to be sort of coloring and flavorful and just kind of little dashes here and there. And that's really cool. I mean, that's what you kind of want. It's like, oh, we did this thing, but then this other little thing happened. It's just a way that this procedural engine to kind of just generate a little bit of the story and narrative without just going shaking you, and everything is like heightened dramatics. You know, I look at it like, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You have the movies, which is like the entire multiverse of existence is at stake in every single movie, lightly. Then you have the Marvel TV shows that are on Disney Plus. It's like, oh, these are characters, these are people. They have like lives, and then they have this kind of, you know, quirky sort of side story of them being a superhero, which is almost incidental. But it makes it, to me, that much more enjoyable to watch, because it's like, oh, this is like real life, and then they have this kind of skewed perspective on it, which is why I liked comic books in the first place. Not because the end of civilization was at hand every week. You know, it's because it's this quirky sort of person that has a job and a life, and then they have this other kind of weird sort of hidden, or, you know, acute sort of personality difference. And this kind of is in that same vibe where it's like you have this fun adventure that's a little bit heightened. It's, you know, there's a little bit sort of hyper realization to everything, but it's not like the constant like threat of doom of this kingdom is always under threat. It's like this pervasive sort of underlying thing, and there's some nice world building with that, which I showed you with like kind of the ancient lands where you can kind of go later on. And there's just enough little nooks and crannies and tidbits of world building in here to make it not so overbearing and force-fed, but it allows you to kind of pepper it in those gaps yourself, which is really cool. I really, really like that. Let's see, some of the other things is, and yeah, it's just like, so in different towns you can do different things, little things like that. You know, the main city has all the main guilds, so you can go back to that. The way it generates quests, you know, and says it can send you far away. Sometimes it can send you to the next neighboring town or to the little ruins around the corner of the forest, and all those little things, like all of those little like spicy details, which are just enough to give you the flavor, is what makes it really, really cool. I mean, you know, you got talents and perks, for example. So that's a total role-playing type of vibe. A lot of these board games and stuff, they have some of that, but this crafting of your character is not to the level that it is in here. And just some of these other mini games and stuff, I call them mini games, but you've got like enchanting items, you've got you can get these like different power stones and stuff like that. You've got the alchemy side of it. It's just like, oh, there's a whole other like, you know, sort of subsystem in here, and you can go and you can pick campaigns. You can do like, you know, 2, 3, 6-part campaigns. There's several of those in here. There's rules for kind of procedurally generating quests. You can just, you know, so you can kind of just let the world come to you. You've got your backstory quests, which I highly recommend rolling up. So I've been gushing here, and the ergonomics of the components and everything makes everything very easy to manage. Now, let's put some caveats in here just so we're not, you know, making a puff piece. So there is an FAQ. I've been in correspondence with Michael several times over the last week or so with questions and stuff. So the rules are in here, but sometimes they're hard to find. Sometimes I've found rules that were on the player aid but not quite clear in the rule book. So he's been updating the FAQ, and I think he's been in talks with other people as well. So it's not, none of it has been to me like a deal breaker at all. When you do get the game, or if you get it later, get the FAQ. It should clarify, I think, just about everything. So it's there. So the thing you have to kind of keep in mind with this game, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but it's basically one guy plus three artists. One guy. So I have seen rules of 15th the size of this from very established publishers with just about as many kind of mistakes, if you want to call them out, or oversights or unclarities. I have seen that a lot, and this is basically one guy. I'm sure he's had help and proofreaders and stuff like that, so I don't know exactly, but I'm sure he's had some help. But effectively, it's a one-guy company. So again, none of this is a deal breaker, but I do want you to know that kind of going in, that there will be kind of that, just a little bit of sort of growing pains and stuff. Like everything is pretty clear in you know, you can get there with it. But you just know there might be a couple of like use cases, so to speak, or one-off sort of cases that might be confusing. But again, nothing honestly that's been like so like game stopping or anything like that. The other thing is the first scenario of like the intro game, and I think it's because, so basically there's no spoilers here, but you set up camp and it's one of those outdoor scenarios, and you get jumped by bandits before you go into whatever starting town that you rolled up. That has almost been, I think, the hardest scenario that I've had to play. The very, very first one. And I only think it's because of, there's 4 bandits, I believe, that come out. And there's one of them is a bandit leader. And he has a weapon that is a D12, I think it's a D12 plus 1. And it can like one-shot your heroes. Because they're not going to start off like a ton of hit points because you haven't leveled up or anything. And I almost think if you were to change that weapon out and just give them whatever the long sword or the short sword that the other bandits had, then it would be okay. But I actually played that one twice, mostly because I played a rule wrong in the beginning. And then I was like, oh, I got to redo that. Maybe that's why I lost. I'm like, nope, it was still really hard. But I'd say that I would just caveat that opening scenario. You know, do what you want with that. But to me, it was just like, the second time I played it, I barely won it. It was like, holy cow, is this game going to be this brutal? It's not that brutal. It can still be very brutal. But that first scenario, there's something about it. It's just, I don't think that bandit leader should have a D12 plus 1 or D12 sword. Just like, because I was like, oh, my barbarian's dead. Because I don't have any like healing, you know, at the beginning. I had my wizard who could heal, but then what if you fail a heal roll, which I did? It's not hard to fail a heal roll on a level 1 wizard because arcane is not that high. So I just want to, if you're still watching this video this late into it, that first scenario can be rough. Now the other scenarios definitely are not as rough. They can have their moments of drama and stuff, but I would never felt like I was, you know, immediate party wipe danger. From any of those, from any other scenarios. I had people fall and then I got to get them back up, and there was dicey situations, but I never felt like, oh, we're just going to totally wipe. It was like that perfect level of balance. And but this one, I mean, at first I was just like, oh my gosh, this game is like the hardest game probably to win, and it's not, thankfully. So that opening scenario, just a little bit of a caveat there. But yeah, I cannot recommend this enough because this just has all of those kind of things that I've talked about in a lot of these other dungeon crawl reviews. I talked quite a bit about it, I think, in the Descent Legends of the Dark review a year and a half ago or so. Probably some other ones. I know I've mentioned it within the last year or two, that I really was wanting to have something in that Warhammer Quest Shadows of Brimstone vein, but with a really kind of, well, in my mind, I was looking for like kind of a modern feel to it, maybe something with an app or something. But this is what I've been looking for. And it just has all of that perfect amount of crunch and bookkeeping, and all that stuff is like the perfect level. Like I talked about, the events it's not just like constantly like beating the crap out of you over and over and over again. It's just like enough of that. It's hard enough, because there's going to be times when you're just like, gosh, my ranger cannot hit the broadside of a barn. And, you know, because you just are failing that, and it keeps you on your toes in that kind of way with all of this stuff, and just has enough of that sort of underlying sort of world stuff and character building and variety and things like that, and the economics of the components in terms of like, there's a lot of stuff here, but it never feels like you've got just a bunch of crap on the board. With a lot of times some of these other big Kickstarters and stuff, it's just like, this is not like that. You've got all the right amount of stuff in here. Like, you don't even make use of all the, you don't have to set up like a huge stacks of cards, which I love Brimstone for that, but Brimstone is like, it's like think about a quarter of this game topper with just card stacks everywhere. And this doesn't need to do that. You know, but it still has all of the extra variety and stuff based on the way it works. So it has all of that stuff, you know, and everybody always wants, I want a hex crawl, and these companies are like, yeah, you can make your own or whatever, you know, like, you know, maybe this guy went and did it, and he did it in such a cool way about how you can sort of, you know, generate quests on different parts of the map and everything. And I think he really, you know, I don't want to speak for him, but either internally, like, kind of had that same sense of like all the different things you want out of a dungeon crawl, or he just has really been listening to people. And like I started to talk about at the beginning, I'll close with this, you know, I saw this game start to get mentioned in like some of the different Warhammer Quest and Facebook, Hero Quest Facebook groups and Discord groups and things like that. And it got a lot of really good kind of buzz just from community in general. And I saw a couple of different channels like Dungeon Dive and stuff like that pick it up, and I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. And I was very tempted to kind of do the preview, but I didn't want to like break, you know, my kind of rule for that, so to speak. It's not really a rule, but I was like, I have to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm glad I did. So what he's done here has been really, I think, special in a way. So I hope he does do a second printing, and because he did really well. I just want to give a compliment. So if you weren't following this Kickstarter and you're still watching this video, like I said, it's a one-man operation, and he did hit some shipping snafus and distribution snafus and stuff like that. But you can see it's delivered. I mean, it's arriving to backers now. And he was very transparent and open with the whole process. So when there was a delay, you knew exactly why there was a delay. And there was a very detailed Kickstarter update about he was working with this person, or he was having to change, you know, some level of distribution, and all the details are probably all there still on the Kickstarter page in the updates. So he's very specific about that. It was about a once every week or every 2 weeks or so, you know, updating with the components and stuff. So he really cared through the whole process. So part of me, those couple of like sort of, you know, rules, omissions, or just unclarities and stuff, that definitely gets a pass from me, because you can see what he was dealing with on the sort of the production and the distribution side, which was probably mentally taxing. And I don't think you can kind of undersell that at all. I don't think you ever could undersell that. And so he did really a great job on sort of delivering on the promise of all of this, and sort of not abusing that community goodwill, which there was a lot of. It's kind of, and this is not really what area I get into with my reviews, but I just want to speak to it because I think this is a unique case. He didn't abuse that goodwill that sort of arose out of his design that a lot of people were enjoying when it was a print and play game. So I just want to give a little bit of credit there. So anyway, that's League of Dungeoneers. If you have any questions or anything like that, I mean, I didn't talk through a few other mechanics and stuff, but I know it's kind of long, but I think it's worth it, and I've just had a blast with it. It's just like that perfect thing, and I still want to play it more and more and more, just to kind of see kind of where it lands in my kind of pantheon, you know, of dungeon crawls. So, all right, thanks.